So we often talk about the same things on this channel over and over again. That's intentional. Last video, we were discussing a few concepts that we often touch upon, and really, we'll touch upon even more. But first of all, something we often talk about that was kind of in the middle of the last video, that was from the excerpt of Law of Attraction Simplified, which I wrote back in 2021, and is a book that you should, frankly, definitely read. Definitely read if you're into what I talk about on this channel. In that excerpt I read, I was talking about asserting and essentially affirming what you want, doing that regularly. And that's what we always talk about in regards to Coué and autosuggestion and great ways of doing this that like Joseph Murphy talks about, etc. But the two other things we spoke about are things that we don't always speak about as openly and explicitly as I did last video, and what I want to touch upon again today. I'm going to touch upon the second thing more. But the first thing we spoke about, and it's so important, I'll probably do more videos on this soon, is this really being comfortable with your feelings and becoming more intimate with what you feel, and realizing that feeling bad or, feeling fear, feeling hurt, scared, shame, anxiety, all of these feelings are things we usually have to work through and actually work with, as opposed to hide away from and be scared of. Far too often in the Law of Assumption, Law of Attraction, Neville Goddard, Abraham Hicks, Blakadakadakadaka's community, we're scared of our feelings. And I think that being scared of how we feel and trying to just have a certain feeling, which is what Neville kind of talks about, and doesn't give the best advice how to deal with it if you can't get that certain feeling. Trying to have a certain feeling and denying or trying to repress all your other feelings is going to be counterproductive for most of us. Hugely counterproductive. It's what we don't want to do. We want to feel into our feelings and become more comfortable with them and feel better about how we're feeling. When we feel like shit, we want to embrace feeling like shit. I have spoken about this a fair amount. I'll put a video above where I speak explicitly about this. Actually, I'm going to put two videos above. I'm going to put the video where I talk about that with that Carl Rogers quote about, until I accept myself fully as I am, it's only then that I can change. That's the paradox, he says. The paradox is I can only change after I fully accept myself as I am currently. So I'm going to put that video above, and then I'm going to put the video above where I just talk about feeling like shit and being totally okay with that and embracing that. That is a huge part of the, you could say, spiritual process. You could say the Law of Attraction process. You could just say the fucking living process and feeling better in your life process. Embracing your feelings. And as I've often mentioned, things like internal family systems, IFS for short, very helpful way of embracing our feelings better. I mentioned Robert Augustus Masters. He talks a lot about emotional intimacy. These type of therapeutic approaches help. They help you become comfortable with what you're feeling and how you're feeling. And then once we become more comfortable with our feelings, we can deal with them more rationally. And that was the second thing we spoke about in this video, in the last video, that we're going to be speaking about more, is being rational, and how rationality should be our friend during this process of trying to manifest better, consistently feeling better in our lives by accepting when we feel shitty. That's how we usually feel better in our lives, by accepting when we feel shitty and being okay with momentarily not feeling okay. That's a huge way to help us feel better more consistently in our lives. And it's also how we manifest things externally better, is we accept our feelings better and we become more rational about what we want and how we can deal with our feelings more effectively. We use rationality. A master at explaining this, one of my favorite LOA teachers, which, just like Emile Coué, most people wouldn't even consider him a Law of Attraction teacher. That dude, Maxwell Maltz, author of Psycho-Cybernetics, as well as a bunch of other really fantastic books. We have spoken about Psycho-Cybernetics a lot, in my podcast, and in some of these videos. As Mitch Horowitz said, and I mentioned this in somewhere, Mitch Horowitz, I think, said, he said that the two books I would recommend to people who are getting into the law of attraction, if they're new to it, are The Power of Your Subconscious Mind and Psycho-Cybernetics. And I agree with what Mitch said. And as I have said previously, not only do I think The Power of Your Subconscious Mind and Psycho-Cybernetics are two of the most helpful books for people when they're getting into these principles, but they're also two of the most helpful books once you are well versed in these principles and have been doing this stuff for years. You'll go back to The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, which we've been doing a lot recently, the last month or two, for instance, reading those chapters, and you'll be like, wow, this is so helpful, and even more helpful in many ways than when I first read it. And Psycho-Cybernetics, in my opinion, is even more like that. Psycho-Cybernetics is the kind of book that once you're well versed in these LOA concepts, you'll go back and read it and be like, man, is this the best book ever written about the law of attraction? Even though it's not about the law of attraction, or the best book written in the last, 60 or so years about it. Psycho-Cybernetics is a masterpiece. And I'm going to read to you the beginning of chapter 5. The name of this chapter is How to Utilize the Power of Rational Thinking. Okay? This is, again, the kind of stuff that in too many LOA circles and Neville circles, we just don't hear about people talking about the power of rationality. It's like what they don't want to hear about. Don't be rational, just assume the end. Good fucking luck with that, buddy. It's not that simple usually. So Maltz writes, many of my patients are plainly disappointed when I prescribe something as simple as using their God-given power of reason as a method of changing negative beliefs and behavior. To some, it seems incredibly naive and unscientific, yet it does have one advantage. It works. And as we shall see later, it is based on sound scientific findings. There is a widely accepted fallacy that rational, logical, conscious thinking has no power over unconscious processes or mechanisms, and that to change negative beliefs, feelings, or behavior, it is necessary to dig down deep and dredge up material from the quote-unquote unconscious. Your automatic mechanism, or what the Freudians call the unconscious, is absolutely impersonal. It operates as a machine and has no quote-unquote will of its own. It always tries to react appropriately to your current beliefs and interpretations concerning environment. It always seeks to give you appropriate feelings and to accomplish the goals that you consciously determine. It works only on the data that you feed it in the form of ideas, beliefs, interpretations, opinions. Holy shit. That's the law of attraction in a nutshell. The reason we always talk about Coué and like auto-suggestion and affirming something that you want and resonates with you over and over again, the reason we're always referring to Murphy and his simple affirmation exercises is because of this paragraph. And remember too how when Coué talks about the unconscious or subconscious, he says it's synonymous basically with your imagination. Let me read that paragraph again. Your automatic mechanism, or what the Freudians call the quote-unquote unconscious, is absolutely impersonal. It operates as a machine and has no will of its own. It always tries to react appropriately to your current beliefs and interpretations concerning environment. It always seeks to give you appropriate feelings and to accomplish the goals that you consciously determine. It works only on the data that you feed it in the form of ideas, beliefs, interpretations, opinions. Holy cow! That means that if you're using your reason, if you're using your rationality and start inserting beliefs or simply ideas, like by simply affirming words that are powerful and positive for you, like peace, 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 or saying statements that, like Murphy always talks about, every day in every way I'm getting prospered more and more in all of my activities. I'm getting better and better. Things are going better and better. If you start inserting, actively, consciously asserting statements, positive phrases, words, and just all these different beliefs into your mind, into your imagination, into your unconscious, just by stating them, things change for the better. All-time classic paragraph there. It is conscious thinking that is the control knob of your unconscious machine. It was by conscious thought, though perhaps irrational and unrealistic. It was through conscious thought. It was by conscious thought, though perhaps irrational and unrealistic, that the unconscious machine developed its negative and inappropriate reaction patterns. And it is by conscious rational thought that the automatic reaction patterns can be changed. You dig that? You get this, right? This is not that complicated. It's, was us accepting, not the best and most positive of ideas that we got ourselves into this mess, figuratively speaking, at least, in a big way. A lot of our troubles and worries are because of what we accepted, and perhaps accepted not rationally. Like, we didn't think about it rationally. If we thought about it rationally, we would not have accepted it, but we were probably young and thought it was the best thing to do, even though rationally now we know it doesn't make sense. And we developed negative and inappropriate reaction patterns. And just in the way that we develop those, we can develop good and positive reaction patterns. They can be changed. That's what Maltz is saying here. He's saying it so clearly. This is why Psycho-Cybernetics, if you're into this stuff, this is a book you want to study. At least, if it resonates for you at all. This is much more relevant for most of you, believe it or not, than Neville Goddard's teachings, once you're familiar with Neville's teachings. This is much more relevant than Abraham Hicks, once you're familiar with Abraham Hicks' teachings, for most of you at least. If that stuff deeply resonates, obviously I love Neville, and I love Abraham Hicks too. If that stuff deeply resonates, great. Just keep on utilizing it and ignore this advice. But if that stuff resonates, but you feel like it's not, like you're missing something, or there's a level of effectiveness and rationality that's missing, read Psycho-Cybernetics and continue to study and read Coué. And a lot of stuff will be clarified through plain old rational thinking. Maltz goes on to write in this section, Dr. John A. Schindler, author of How to Live 365 Days a Year, and who introduced the concept of emotionally induced illness, won nationwide fame for his outstanding success in helping unhappy, neurotic people regain the joy of living and return to productive, happy lives. His percentage of cures far exceeded that of psychoanalysis. Sounds a lot like Coué. One of the keys to his method of treatment was what he called conscious thought control. Regardless of the omissions and commissions of the past, he said, a person has to start in the present to acquire some maturity so that the future may be better than the past. The present and the future depend on learning new habits and new ways of looking at old problems. There simply isn't any future in digging continuously into the past. The underlying emotional problem has the same common denominator in every patient. This common denominator is that the patient has forgotten how, or probably never learned how, to control his present thinking to produce enjoyment. Holy fucking shit. Again, this is gold if you get this. Okay? This is valuable stuff. This book costs $20. It's worth 1,000 times that price at least if you study what is in this. The reason we always talk about being present and now, recognizing the abundance of now, recognizing now, over and over again is because of this. And there's a rational explanation, which this gentleman, Dr. Schindler, gave, and which Coué always talks about, what Maltz always talks about. The underlying emotional problem has the same common denominator in every patient. This common denominator is that the patient has forgotten how, or probably never learned how, to control his present thinking to produce enjoyment. This is, there's ways to do this. I talk about a lot of different ways in the joy of not thinking. More directly, auto-suggestion, what you're suggesting to yourself, is about what you're thinking presently. Whatever you're thinking presently and think consistently has a tendency to come to pass. That's, again, the power of what Coué always talks about and what all these guys are talking about. Let's learn how to better control our present thinking. And in the way that Coué says, like a wild torrent can flood a town, we can learn how to control that same water and irrigate the whole town. Or how riding a wild horse can, it bucks you in hurts you, if you can learn how you can domesticate that wild horse and ride it, and it can be a great ally. Let's work with our present thinking, because that's all we have. And if we can deal with it more rationally, wow, are we going to like the results? Tim Grimes, RadicalCounselor.com. Coaching, questions, anything else, let me know. Have a good day.